Hello, everyone. How are you all doing today? Wonderful to see you. Thank you very much. Hold on while I get a couple things set here. Thank you, Michael, and Elaine, and Tom. Hello, Paulina, BK Duck, Achilles Heel, CBR. How's everyone? Hey, Ian, how are you doing? Great to see everybody. Foul Pals, how are you? Star Crunch Boy Fruit, good to see everyone here. Lovely to be back on a Monday and to be talking about one of my favorite things, audio. So today is part 3. Hey, Mycraft, Stan Arthur, present, great to see you. Chia Design. Today is going to be part 3 of this continuing series, perhaps a never-ending series of audio nerdery. And today I'm going to focus on the Spectral Frequency Display. Hey, Chia. And basically really explain, for those of you who've never used this before, what it is and how you can use it and how you can sort of get creative using the Spectral Frequency Display for all different types of not just editing. Normally when I show this, 80% of the time it's based around doing things with noise reduction or something along those lines. And we're really going to sort of investigate and dive into a couple of different scenarios that I think you'll find very useful. And these are things that I use as needed. You know, it's not something that you're going to use every day necessarily, but actually you might, depending upon the kind of work you do. And once you really understand what you're looking at, it becomes very easy to identify things and then to think about new creative ways to process them and work with them. Okay. So, fancy meeting you here too as well, CBR. All right, so I think we're going to get started right away. And I've broken this down into basically four categories. So first is understanding. Understanding what this thing is that we're looking at here. So there's understanding, and then from that understanding, identifying things that you want to do in here. And then a combo, edit, repair, what does that say? Edit, repair, restore. So how to edit, how to repair, how to restore things, how to use the Spectral Frequency Display as, again, another kind of editing tool to fix stuff. And then the last part, in the last 10 minutes or so, will be affecting, painting, and sort of truly getting creative in this view, largely for things like sound design, but even for remixing, doing mashups, and just leveraging your eyes to do unique things that you probably couldn't otherwise do solo with your ears, okay? So, very nice. Glad to hear it. All right. I'm just looking at Achilles. You exported AIF files from a GarageBand project. It had a lot of tinny noise. Can I use the Spectral Frequency Display for that? You certainly can, but more importantly, you would use the Spectral Frequency Display to understand and identify said tinny frequencies and attenuate them. So let's dive right in, because that's really along the lines. Hey, Dominic, how are you? Popcorn, coffee, notebook. Excellent. Ooh, popcorn and coffee. A combo I have not yet tried. By the way, my face is not super red. It's just the spectrally, it makes you blush. A lot of red coming off my monitor here. All right. Music should be off now, hopefully. Oh, I guess I need headphones on. Okay. All right. So, as mentioned, the first place we need to start is understanding. Understanding what the Spectral Frequency Display is all about. So I'm going to use a couple of files, some demo files here that I've used before, most of which I've created, some of which I've acquired over the years. But this is really, these are sort of the fundamental building blocks for understanding how this works. It's super nerdy, and as I've mentioned on every broadcast, this is part 3. This is not a quick fix. I'm really going to dive into all the various options here to help you truly understand how this works, to get the best result out of using Spectral Frequency Display in Audition, and more importantly, to really spark, that's a good one, to light the fire in your brain of creativity. Did doesn't really make a lot of sense. To really inspire new ways to work with audio, all right? And this can be used audio for video, anything, all right? Now, we are not the only ones today that have a spectral frequency display. Pretty much I think every DAW, every audio editing app has it. Bring on the nerdiness, Alfoot 3, yes. We've had it perhaps the longest. Don't want to get into a legal battle here. I mean, years ago when it was Cool Edit, we used to talk to, when there was Sadie and Cedar noise reduction systems, restoration systems. There's a big match over who actually had the spectral display first. I don't really remember. Who even really cares, frankly? I will tell you this. You can do more in hours than anyone else's. Is that marketing and sales? Could be. Is it true? Yes. Does it matter? Well, you decide, all right? But you can do more here, largely because of the tool set that we have. And I'm going to be covering all of these various tools that you see up here. All right. So understanding, part 1. What are we looking at here? The spectral frequency display allows you to see frequency over time. Frequency along your vertical axis. And you can see, now this is a band-limited file. If we just take a look here, just so you can see, this is what's known as an 11 kilohertz file. So this is like if you were to record something off of a telephone. This is like the sample rate that you'd be well, that's all that's there on like an analog phone line. So that means that based on our Nyquist limit, which we'll talk about more in another episode, but at 11K sampling rate, that means that our highest captured frequency is approximately 5,500 hertz. So you're looking at all of the hertz, all of the frequencies along the vertical axis. We're all the way at the bottom. We've got 0 here, 10 hertz, 20 hertz. These are all of your subsonics, 50 and 60 hertz. And you can see we've got a nice 60 cycle hum penetrating through this file right here. Very commonly encountered with dirty, power outlets and just sort of, bad electricity, bad wiring. And then we have, of course, all of our mid-range frequencies, 1K, 2K, 3K. A lot of vocal fundamentals can be found, and harmonics of voices can be found in those ranges. And then, of course, the higher frequencies. So the Y vertical axis are frequencies displayed from lowest to highest, bottom to top. Now, along the x-axis, the horizontal, of course, we have time. That does not change. So the time is linear, left to right, and we can see that approximately we've got, how long is this? About 9 seconds in duration. And the colors that you see represent amplitude, okay? The closer the color is to yellow, all right, or the brightest it can get, yellow, I mean, it won't get any brighter than yellow, but I used to say the closer it gets to white, but sort of bright yellow is the loudest, the highest color you're going to see here. The louder the amplitude at that particular frequency. So, say that again. The brighter the color, the closer it is to yellow, white, the louder the amplitude at that particular frequency. So when we listen to this, we're going to hear a lot of something, humming, buzzing most likely, at 60 hertz, and then all of the subsequent harmonics of that, whatever that is. There's probably 180 there. You can see here 300, etc., etc., etc. All this stuff that's very yellow is going to be very loud. Now, the quieter the amplitude, the closer the color is to black. So when you look up here, in these sections that I'm highlighting here, you can see that it's almost like there's areas of darkness. It's just total black. That means that there's no amplitude present at those particular frequencies, all right? And then basically everything in between, much like imaging, it's a gradient, right? It's a sort of a gradient dissolve. So as you go from yellow, think of yellow as loud as you can get, to sort of yellowish orange, to sort of orangish red, to kind of reddish, maroonish, purplish, blackish. One of my favorite new shows. The closer it is to black, the quieter the amplitude. The closer it is to yellow, the louder the amplitude. Simple enough. Not so simple to look at initially if you've never seen it, but you will get the idea. You'll get this. Okay, so, Admiral Shane, glad you're here, man. All right, so we see a lot of linear horizontal lines starting at around 60. Now, whether you really know audio very well or not, if you see 60, which I've already described to you, like if you ever hear 60 cycle hum, 50 cycle hum if you're in Europe, This is that very low, buzzy, it can sometimes be buzzy, depends, rumble that, again, often happens from, not so clean power connections and such. This is what it's going to look like, all right? Noise, different types of noise, hum, buzz, electrical noise will always be represented very linearly, all right? So it's very easy to visually identify. So again, talking about understanding and identifying, all right? So when I look at this file, now I understand, all right, we've got frequency along the Y, we've got time along the X, color is amplitude, so all this stuff, all these lines here are going to be super loud. What are these lines? Well, I don't know exactly, perhaps, but because they're linear like that, it's either a synthesizer generating some kind of bass mid-range tone, like a, bzzz, and that's what you're seeing, because that's the only time you'd see something so linear, or it's some kind of electrical noise. Now, other things like fan and air conditioner, they too may have some linear components, but they're often a little bit more freeform. And as we look at more and more things here, I've got a bunch of examples, you'll see what I'm saying. So, on the surface, if we look at this, we can see these things. Now, we also see all of this stuff here, okay? See these little sort of free-form globs. I was watching Hotel Transylvania 2 this weekend, so it's blobby. You see these sort of blobs of audio here. What are these things? Well, we don't know just yet. But what we can see is that whatever they are, they seem to occur in a fairly, refined frequency range, and they happen like 3 times. 1, and then there's some black, right? 2, and then there's some black space. Remember, black meaning no amplitude, right? The quietest the signal can be. 3, and then again. So, and there's little bits of red and orange flicks in there, but ultimately you can see a divide. So that tells us that whatever is happening here starts, and then stops, and then starts again, and then stops, and then starts again. Okay, all right, so now I can kind of see this. So what is this? All right, I'm just going to bounce over to our waveform view. Now, if you are in headphones, I've attenuated this, so it's only playing it around. I'm going to attenuate this even more, actually. This will be loud, but hopefully it doesn't blow you out of your chair, because I've attenuated it about 7 dB. Take a quick listen to this. Why are the bright lines spaced out? I may have missed it. Yes, because what we're seeing here, this is some kind of electrical noise, and all of these bright lines spaced like that, what you're actually seeing are the harmonics of that fundamental noise, right? So when you sing, ah, there's your kind of fundamental note, but there's also harmonics generated above that. When you play a piano, when you play a guitar, there's all these subsequent harmonics of that initial pitch, and you will see them represented along the frequency spectrum. And again, we'll see more of that momentarily. Harmonics. All right, so that cold caller that rings you weekly. Yes, Ian, you are onto something here, but we're not going to hear he or she just yet, because when I play this back, brace yourselves. That's what we have, okay? Neil, can you isolate the linear hum and hear it individually from the rest of the sample? Yes, you can, and there's different ways that you can do that. And we're not going to cover all of those ways today, but I'm going to show you right now some of those different ways. Okay, so we hear a lot of buzz, we hear a lot of noise, and then we can kind of probably faintly hear something going on. Well, Ian kind of said it already, and just for time purposes, this is talking, okay? Now, the reason we can't hear this talking is because, again, color is amplitude. And you can see that however this talking was captured, it was at a significantly lower amplitude than the noise. Even when you look at this waveform in the waveform editor, it just looks like a brick. Like you might say, oh, well, there's talking sort of up there, right? Well, it doesn't look like anything. Right? I'm not seeing, I mean, that, that doesn't tell me that's talking. That just looks like distortion, actually. That looks really horrible. So if we were given this file like this in a waveform view, there's nothing we could do here, right? We don't know what we're looking at. We just know, okay, Garbage test. What is this? All right. So, love the mug. Oh yeah. Today's mug sponsored by coffee. Before Krabby Pants, after happy as a clam. Now, Ian and some other regulars will know I'm no fan of expressions. Happy as a clam is one of them. What does that even mean? Clams experience joy? I mean, I don't fault them if they do, but what does that even mean? Happy as a clam? That's so dumb. Ugh. Okay. Anyway, let's go back into the spectral frequency display. Now, I'm just going to show you something with regard to noise very quickly so that you can further understand what you're looking at. Now, someone just asked about hearing those noises independently. Now, one of the very cool things is when you make a selection in the spectral frequency display, and I talked about this last week in our general editing course, you have all these different tools available to you. These tools will look familiar because these are the same tools that you have in Photoshop and many of our other apps, including a spot healing brush, which we'll get to later, a paintbrush, painting on sound, yes, you heard that correct, a lasso selection tool, a marquee selection tool, and a time selection tool. So when you make a selection, whether it's marquee, lasso, time, whatever, when you make that selection in the spectral frequency display and hit play, you are only hearing you're only hearing the frequencies that you've selected. I don't know why that was so difficult for me to get out. All right. So again, if I select this here, that's what your 60 cycle hum sounds like. Okay. And if you've ever recorded something, if you've ever, it can be, again, it can occur in a number of different ways. If you've got a subwoofer, oh, excuse me. That was an added bonus for you. If you've got a sub, you'll feel it, but you can hear 60 pretty well. Now, when you're actually defining these sounds, okay, I'm going to make a smaller selection here on the harmonics. All right. You can actually hear what each of these harmonics sounds like. We can actually just move this up. Got a little bit of a chord going on there, a little of a major third. Oh, sorry, fifth. Okay, etc., etc. All right, we can keep moving this. Now that's only about 1K. Now you can see it's pretty quiet, right? It's about -48. So if you're not hearing it very well, don't worry. It doesn't mean that you've lost your hearing because you should be able to hear 1K unless you've encountered great hearing loss, which I'm very sorry to hear that if you have. But that's 1K. Now, if we wanted to make this 1K bigger, louder, just this little bit right here, we talked about this on-clip volume control last week, all right? Let's pump this up amplitude-wise. So what should happen? We're going to do 15 dB. It was at -45. What should happen to the color of this little harmonic right here? It should get closer to yellow, right? Or closer to orangey yellow. And sure enough, it did. All right. So let's undo, redo. Now you can hear that frequency much more easily. Right? Here's the before. Here's the after. And you can actually see, oh my God, look, it just works. It's approximately 15 decibels hotter than it was just at that frequency. All right. Very cool. Very cool. Nailed it, Electron Hammer. Very good. Suculicious, you really expected the thick one to be making the most noise. Aha. Well, it's making the most pronounced noise, right? At the fundamental. That's where it starts. That's why it's the brightest. However, again, all those subsequent harmonics are also there, and they will trail off in amplitude, right? So, are we getting this? We're seeing what's happening here, right? So cool. All right. So now that we can do that, now we want to actually see what's going on underneath here. All right. How would we reveal what's going on underneath here? Now I will do a whole separate course, and you'll see this file again because this is just a great sort of training example because and by the way, this was a real capture. This wasn't faked. This was acquired years ago by a friend of mine who worked for a company called Symbiosis in the UK. And they did like CSI investigative audio stuff. So if we wanted to reveal what's underneath here, we can see that there's stuff, we just can't hear it because, again, understanding that all of this noise, there's too many of those low-end harmonics. Now, there's a couple ways that we could do this, all right? Because we can identify that this is 60 cycle hum. If we went into filter and EQ, we have this notch filter in here, all right? Now, the notch filter actually probably has some presets. I believe it does. Yes. So you can see 60 hertz in octaves, 60 hertz in harmonics, all right? And we could go to one of these presets, 50 hertz, etc., and simply enable one of these. And if we go ahead and click play, it doesn't really quite get rid of it all because now we could adjust these settings here, but there's more than this is going to allow you to do within 6 bands, okay? We need more control over this. Sometimes that works, and I'm pointing that out because if it's just like a very faint 60 cycle, 50 cycle hum or rumble, oftentimes a notch filter can get rid of that. Often at the expense, of course, of removing all of the low-end fundamental from your sound. Yegeros, can you just select and delete the yellow lines? Great question. Answer, yes you can. So if we wanted to go all rogue on this, all right, we could just select these, as was just selected, and just start deleting these things out. Now, you might think, well, that's very destructive. It is. It's also confining things to very specific frequency ranges. Now, the problem with doing this on a file like this, and this may work okay, first of all, it's removing a lot of the same sort of harmonic areas very destructively from that voice that's underneath. Additionally, now this one isn't too bad because the file has a sample rate of 11K. But if you've got very complex sounds and noises with lots of present harmonics, this could take a very long time to do. But just by doing that, mind blown, Sukalicious. Okay? Ooh, now listen. I don't know if you can hear that yet, because again, the amplitude is very quiet on this stuff. But now we can start to hear what's going on underneath there. We're actually revealing. Now, again, why you probably wouldn't do this line by line is because you've got, now you're hearing all that, the high-end buzziness. It's a dog sound right there. You can't hear it, right? This is going to take you a long time to do. So you probably wouldn't do it manually. Although many times just going in, drawing and deleting, excellent question, dude or dudette, that's how you do it, all right? So you can actually destructively delete, select, like that. But here's a better way. I'm going to undo all that stuff. Zoom back out here and get a couple more. Okay, we can just bring them back in like that. This is absolutely CSI. Absolutely CSI. Hey, Gamings. Gaming Saft Press. All right, so instead of doing that, we're now going to actually just take a noise profile. Now, again, I will cover this again when I do noise reduction, but I just wanted to show you kind of the amazing thing of doing stuff with your eyes. Because the point is, the waveform view, as I described, for many cases, something like this is useless to us. All right? If someone says to you in an audio editor, here, take this file and denoise it, I mean, there's other effects and things that you could try and maybe get lucky, but looking at this visually, this is not going to tell you anything. This is no good to you. So you have to do this spectrally to really understand what's going on so that you can better fix the problem. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a selection where I just have noise, because remember, these sections here, these are quieter. I must have, or the person underneath, it's not me, stopped talking or took a pause. So because of that, I'm able to take a little sample here, which is just the noise in question. I know you're thinking, oh, there's some stuff right there. Now, again, if I wanted to really clean up that selection, by the way, this is totally legit. I could come in here, make a lasso, just get rid of whatever that is, because I know that isn't consistent. That's not part of the same noise. So now you have another ability here to simply remove unwanted elements for creating a sample, a profile. This is getting very scientific here, but you're doing all this with your eyes. All right, like I know this stuff here, it doesn't factor into that buzz. So we can just get rid of it, all right? So now we've got a nice clean looking sample. Let's go back to our time selection tool. Make a selection like this. Sukalicious, so is this similar to what the noise removal process is doing? Well, not exactly, but we're gonna, and again, I don't want to derail too much. Yes, no, but we'll come back to that. If you guys tell me at the end, if you want me to do noise reduction Friday, I'll do a full hour on noise reduction. But I'm just showing this to prove the point. So we're going to capture a noise print, and that's going to take a sonic snapshot of all of those noisy frequencies and all of their subsequent harmonics, okay? Come in here, noise reduction process. Again, this isn't a noise class, so don't worry. We'll do this in greater detail so you get to see all my steps. I'm simply going to go spectral decay 0 on this. We're going to reduce by 100%. Why? Because I just want to reveal what's underneath. We're not making an album with this file yet. So it's okay if there's, a little bit of junk in there. And now, when I go into the waveform view, look, now we actually see what looks like a normal waveform. And when we look at this spectrally, what happened? This looks like a completely different file. Where's all that stuff? It's gone. Okay? Oh, and you know what? It looks like I removed a little too much because there was a frequency in that range. That's okay. I'm sure this is still going to sound all right, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to take it out right now. Because it removed all the other subsequent harmonics that I was talking about before. All right? So now, if we go into the waveform view, now if we play this back, it's going to be very quiet. How do we know that? Because we can see the peak of the amplitude. So when we're in the waveform display, now we've got amplitude along our y-axis. It's not peaking above -27. So for broadcasting this over Twitch, that's going to be pretty quiet. So let me just go ahead and amplify this. All right. Now again, we're not trying to make a record, so I'm not so worried about the quality, but clearly now we have a very defined waveform that contains some voice. Take a listen.
If amounts were deferred under a tax-sheltered annuity plan or an eligible plan of state or local government or tax-exempt organization.
Okay. Craziness, right? Before, what is repeat? Shift Z.
Plan or an eligible plan of state or local government.
All right. Holy Magic, 2 Eyeball, Whoa, LT Porter, Sukalicious, Achilles Heel, Snap, Sherwin Manoob. All right. Cool. Makes sense? Okay. So that, my friends, is the understanding. And now, remember, I just amplified that voiceover like 30 dB. It was, well, not 30, probably about 20. Now you can see that it's brighter, closer to yellow.
Or an eligible plan of state or local government. Or an eligible plan of state or local government.
And it's intelligible. And you'll also notice the noise reduction. Now again, we'll talk about this later. But noise reduction did not create these holes that delete did. You see that there? Because what it is doing, not unlike, and I like to reference things to imagery. When you heal, when you take things out of an image with any of our content-aware tools, it looks at all the pixels around it to analyze what should be there and what shouldn't, and then it fills the space. Kind of a similar thing going on here, right? It didn't just leave a bunch of little skinny harmonic holes like we saw, right? This would be very destructive, and as we heard before, when I was doing that, it wasn't enough. It didn't really give us the result we needed, right? Noise reduction in that case is much smoother than doing something like this, but oftentimes just highlighting and deleting is really useful, okay? Is my favorite movie The Conversation? Sherwin's like, wow, okay. Higher Minds Media. What's the zapping distortion left behind? That's what it left behind.
Or an eligible plan of state or local government.
All right. It is a spy movie. It is. So excited, Sukalicious. Okay. So that's kind of the fundamental understanding, all right? Frequency over time. Frequency along the vertical, time along the x. Color is amplitude. The brighter it comes to yellow, the louder the amplitude at that frequency. The closer it is to black, the quieter the amplitude at that frequency. And then everything from, from black to yellowish, all the gradients in between are all varying levels of amplitude. All right? Cool. Now, continuing on with identifying. All right? So here we have a voiceover of mine. Actually, this is from an old vocal. But that's okay, because this is often, again, this is what singing looks like. Now, there's not a lot of, let me see, do I have any, vibrato on here? You can see a little bit. You can also see how I'm clearly sort of glissandoing up a note right there. Can you see that? Right? You can actually see what that looks like because we have frequency along the y-axis here. Now I want to point something out too. If you right-click here, remember I told you Audition is a right-click. There's like a frenzy of right-clicking in Audition. Currently I'm viewing this in hertz, right? There's no joke there, friends. I'm very scratchy today. We can also view this in notes, actual note values. B5. So again, related to piano-based octaves, A1, C3, A4, D5, F sharp 5, or G flat 5. So you can actually view this in notes as well. So this is another cool way. If you're going to be doing stuff like auto-tune or fixing or affecting vocals, you can actually look. This is also, there's a great vibrato right there, right? You can see, for one, my vibrato is unbelievably even, right? Look at the peaks and valleys of those waves, right? Very, very even. This is also a great way when you see things like and you speed up the vibrato. You can really see what these things look like, right? We can also isolate specific frequencies here and affect them differently. But more importantly, this is now where we can start to really visually identify things that we need to fix and repair that are not necessarily noise, but just sort of problem audio. So if you take a look here, cool, nice. What's going on? 16. Yes, felt like doing audio as a professional, but I have zero experience in it. Do you think it's too late to start learning audio and trying to do it as a profession? I'm 18. Hey, gamings. No, I guess it depends what kind of profession. I came from the music biz. I'm an audio engineer for a really super long time. And, I love it. So I would never say don't. And it's never too late, really. It just depends what you want to do. If you want to get into the studio, that gig is not quite what it used to be years ago, right? Studio engineer, which is what I was for a number of years, and still do it. But it's start. And honestly, if you're already using other design type apps or even Premiere, After Effects, you hear me talk a lot about sort of relating visual to audio. A lot of those things are the same. A lot of the kind of understanding fundamentals are the same, and you can apply them here. So I would highly recommend it. Do it. Yeah. Zelion. Oh, cool. Oh, I'm sorry I hadn't done it 2 weeks ago. Well, now you know. So, and yes, very, very good words, Lieutenant Porter. There was no such thing as too old to start learning something as a profession. Absolutely true. So if we take a listen here, you'll see that I have a plosive, which is known as a popping P. Were they filled with beans? All right, so this is a vocal from an early take of my children's song, The Toot Toot Monster. Now, when I look at this waveform, and again, as an audio editor, and remember last week we did actual editing, right? So I look at this, and I look at that waveform, and I see this little chunky bit right here. I just know that this is a problem, and I know that this is something that needs fixing. Now, what do you do with a plosive? There's lots of things you can do. There's lots of filters you can use. But what you want to make sure is that you're really only selecting the P, the bassy P sound. Hey, Taria, great to see you. The bassy P sound. Hey, Murky Poo. You just want to select really those bass fundamentals, right? You just want to be careful that you're not extending that too far, because you don't want to remove, you know, all of the low-end frequency from everything, just the plosive. Beans. And here it's not even a P, it's a B sound, or a B. But B and P, especially on a condenser microphone, if you're not careful, very common that you're going to encounter a pop, right? Or just a burst of air that hit that capsule and caused some low-end flutter, low-end rumble. So we can see it here. And typically I would tell you to go into something like the FFT filter, where I actually created a preset 100 years ago called Kill the Mic Rumble. So if I go ahead and apply that, all right, you'll now hear that beans is there and we don't have that popping B anymore. Bean. And there's still enough of the B. You can actually still hear the consonant attack. Bean. But it's not, it was maybe a little clipped. It wasn't quite as precise. Okay. So we undo that. There we go. Let's go into our spectral frequency display. Let's go back into hertz, because for this, notes aren't going to matter so much. So when I look at this waveform here, what do I see? Well, again, frequency over time. And right away, down in these lower frequencies, below 200, can you see this little area here? All right, now we're getting some of that 150 fundamental of my singing. Not going to worry about that with the FFT filter. But what I noticed is my selection that was made, it didn't quite get all of the plosive, right? This here, this is the plosive. Now, could I just delete this? Yes, but for plosives, I find you should use FFT, and a great way to really ensure you got the whole plosive is to actually use the spectral display. Filter and EQ, FFT filter. We're going to use the same preset, Kill the Mic Rumble, and notice what happens. That boom went away. This is ultimately subsonic here, which is why I didn't worry about it. If I am worried about it, this is something that I can actually just select and delete. There aren't any note values down there that are going to affect the singing, the vocal at all. And now when I back this off, filled with beans, beans. Let's undo. And you can really see that energy right there of that, what it looks like, right? Bean. Now that may not be bothering you so much in your phones, but it is bothersome. And when you compress or limit that, it's going to be very accentuated, not what you want. So again, make our selection, repeat the FFT, repeat getting rid of that little bit if we want. Beans. Smooth. Beans. That's right, Electron Hammer. Yeah, Achilles. So now how do you know which filter to use? So again, I'll do a separate one just entirely on EQ. I'm recommending to you now that for plosives, you want to use FFT, and more specifically, you want to make sure that you're only selecting the plosive, because if I selected, you know, the whole line here, it is going to remove all of that below. It was an FFT roll-off. Approximately below 80 hertz, okay, at probably 24 dB per octave. So that's going to kill too much of the overall low end of the sound. So that's why making the selection spectrally is just going to give you a better result. Now, honestly, 9 times out of 10, with things like plosives, which if you do any kind of voice recording, you encounter a lot. Pop filter or not, by the way. Pop filters will stop 90% of them, but not always. And especially on good condensers, which don't have something which is known as proximity effect, you know, when you get too close, even with a pop filter, it's still possible to have a plosive, all right? So it's really about making that careful selection. And while 9 times out of 10 doing it in the waveform view will do it for you, and you'll get it right, you can really refine it. And if you're having trouble identifying it, here in the spectral display. Oh, APOC, that's such great news to hear. Thank you. 5 minutes later makes sense. Awesome. And of course, this will be available to you on video on demand, as well as on my YouTube channel later today. What does it look like with a linear y-axis? What does it look like with a linear y-axis? I'm not sure what you mean by that. I don't know what you mean. You'll have to clarify. Okay. Good morning, Grungy. Hey, good to see you. So you can download it instead of paying for it. Thank you, Murky. That's right. Hey, Sayaluna, great to see you. So nice to see you this morning, this afternoon. If you find the plosive in one spot, can you apply it to the entire track, or does it not work like that? Yeah, okay, great one, Margot. So, as I was just saying, so plosive removal, not unlike spot removal, because a plosive is a pop. Think of a pop like a blemish in a photo. I love relating things to Photoshop. Is there an auto remove all blemishes in Photoshop? No, because ultimately brush sizes need to be adjusted. Sometimes your content aware filling or your content aware replacing to match skin tones and such when it's doing its analysis. It is a case by case basis, and we hear this a lot. I hear this from broadcasters all the time. Oh, I just wish I could do it. And I've highlighted everything below 60 hertz and hit delete. But now my voiceover doesn't have any of that low-end boominess that I love. Exactly. So that's why if you apply like a graphic EQ at dropping 60 or 50 hertz, or making a selection across the whole file and running that FFT filter, everything's going to sound thinner because you're rolling off everything below 80 hertz or so. So no, it does have to be done case by case. Now there's one other technique, again, I'll show this in a later lesson, that you can use, which is known as side chaining, where you can side chain a compressor with equalization. So anytime that there is a plosive present, you can have a compressor and or EQ or band limited compressor kick in and actually minimize those plosives. That works not all the time. So that's kind of an old school analog technique for solving, because again, on tape, there was no remove the plosive, right? You were kind of stuck with it. So there's techniques that you could use keying a compressor EQ to any time that it hit that threshold where you had that, it would attenuate or smooth out those frequencies. But it does typically have to be done case by case. Corentin, you don't understand anything, but it seems cool. All right, again, the VOD. I know this is super techie nerdy, but if you're going to get into this, it's really pretty simple once you understand the fundamentals of what you're looking at. All right? Cool. All right. You're very welcome, Omargo. Yes, Rulu. It is visual art, and we're going to get there in just a second. Okay, so wow, we've got 17 minutes. Man, time just flies. One more identifying, or two more little quick identifying examples here again, so that you kind of understand what you're seeing. Oh, and as I always talk about with preferences. Now, if your spectral frequency display doesn't look like mine, or it doesn't seem to have as much detail, under preferences, there is a spectral display setting here. I highly recommend setting this to a spectral resolution of 4096 and setting the decibel range to 140 dB. These are not the defaults, I do not believe. The lower the spectral resolution, as you can imagine, let's go to 512 here, the harder it is to identify things, right? You see how kind of blocky and pixelated this got? So if the resolution is too low, you're not going to have enough detail, right? So you want, at a minimum, you want your spectral display to be at 4096. Now, you may think, well, why not just make it 16384? You can. There are some diminishing returns because, of course, when there's too much detail, now you may incorrectly select something. This is really kind of the sweet spot. I'll leave this up to you to decide what works best for your system. Now, 8192 is also very nice. This can be a little bit heavy on some systems. And actually, as I said, diminishing returns, when you get up to 16384, sometimes some of that more ambient stuff isn't quite as present because, in fact, it doesn't qualify to be even loud enough to be represented by some kind of linear representation. So 4096, I've been doing this for years. This would be my recommendation for you for kind of best of both worlds, best performance. But the other key is to have this at a decibel range of 140 dB. If you don't have this set to approximately 140 or even above, again, you're not going to have enough amplitude range visible. Which would mean that ultimately, if you're making selections and trying to decide visually what's going on, it's not enough detail. So this is really the sweet spot. The windowing function here, you don't have to be too concerned with these. I believe the default is Blackman-Harris. Blackman-Harris or triangular are both very, very good. And I would use either of those. By the way, the play only selected frequencies when a spectral selection exists, this is a checkbox that you can also defeat, all right? It is on by default. It used to not be, and we convinced them to keep that on. Okay, so, oh gosh, 15 minutes. Okay, just identifying a couple more things here. So this is a recording of a piano concert from many, many moons ago. And why I like this example is this was something where we used to talk about having to remove individual noises, individual sounds. Hold on, let me just change this here back to 4096. Okay, and do you see what I mean? Even at 8192, we weren't quite getting the same kind of transient detail. It was too refined. That's why I say 4096 is really the best of all worlds. So if you take a listen here, this is a solo piano concerto. Yep, Stan Arthur, 4096 looks better already. Exactly. Dominic is setting it now. Grungy Seeing Ghosts. Can you paint in sounds? Yes, you can, and I will be showing you this. Can you copy paste a picture? Achilles, you used to be able to, and you actually used to be able to export this as a ping, do stuff to it in Photoshop, and re-import the image file, which would then give you sound again. That's in Audition 3. We don't currently have that in Audition CC, unfortunately. But you can still paint. I'm going to show you that in these last couple minutes here momentarily. So when I play this back, okay, you're hearing some very faint, these are like mobile ringtones. Now you're probably not hearing them very well. Let me go ahead and amplify these. But I can see them. You can actually see the keys descending, right? You can see the pitch descending. Oh, okay. That's the phone that I don't want. Boom, delete. And you can start to take these things out. And this was actually something where I had actually, this was done for like Australian television over a decade ago. And a guy came to me at a trade show and gave me this and he said, we need to broadcast this. We're screwed. This was like a once-in-a-lifetime deal, this very famous piano player. We need to fix this, and someone's phone went off. And you can tell that this is pre-iPhone because it's those old-school like Nokia ringtones that were tones, right? Probably even before MP3 ringtones came about. And I showed him how to go in here and make selections, and yeah, get rid of that, and get over here and get rid of that. Now, you might think for piano that's kind of destructive, but the thing is, we are in such a small frequency range, right? You can see here, this is 3300 hertz and 3400 hertz. So it's a 100 hertz range in 3K. Your ear is not, all of these little holes will be masked by all of the other ambience around. You're not going to hear that stuff being gone because those ringtones are confined to such small frequency ranges. So again, it's just one more way to visually identify and really understand the Tinty. Exactly. Yes, it was. All right. So cool, right? Electron hammer. I know. Hey, makes a noise here. This is where people are lurking and watching from the Big Red A. I want it back too. It was such a cool feature, and you can still do it. You can still do it again in Audition 3, which you can find in some places. This technology gives me a tear. Very nice, Sherwin. Mad Mips, can I export it to After Effects as a visualizer effect? Well, I mean, you could just do like a screenshot. Unfortunately, there is no direct image export from here anymore. But again, you could in the previous Audition 3. All right, last thing I'm just going to show you before we get to some of the affecting and sort of more musical style editing. This is just a great example of a very commonly encountered thing when recording noisy instruments, guitar amps, bass amps. So this is from a bass recording of my own, actually. I don't even know where this was recorded, but you can see the power was very, very dirty. Okay, dirty power, bad wiring, bad electricity, and as such, the connection to my bass amp, even with a ground lift, was producing this horrible buzzy hum, which you probably can't even really hear. Why can't you hear it? Because even at its lowest fundamental, you can see it's peaking at around minus 54 down here, minus 51. It's still very quiet. That's that same 60 cycle that we had with the bzzz if amounts were deferred under a tax sheltered annuity. But it's very low amplitude. But it's got all these harmonics there, and this is stuff that we don't want. So again, this is where we would take a noise profile of just that. By the way, also notice, do we see any of those buzzy harmonics above 3K? Nope. Therefore, we would only make a selection as high as about 3 or 4K. Therefore, we're not going to remove anything that's unwanted up here that doesn't even exist. Therefore, we won't end up with any swishy, swirly, horrible sounding artifacts. Okay? So again, visually, you can kind of identify where things are. You can identify where things aren't, right? Noise reduction, part of what makes a good noise reduction is, yes, bad power, is, selecting too many frequencies. This is why when you denoise something and you do it too much, you get those kind of weird artifacts because you probably selected a range. You can see up here, is there any hiss coming off of this bass amp? No. I can say that with the utmost certainty. No hiss. Nothing. From 6K and above. Nothing. Minus 63. So why would I want to remove noise from that range? That's what most noise reduction algorithms will do. They're going to denoise everything. This won't, because we wouldn't select anything up there. Okay. APOC is excited to try some of this. What if they had Wrecking Ball as a ringtone? Can you have piano keys on the side instead of frequency? Yes, Achilles, as I mentioned. We don't have the keys, the visual representation, but yes, you can just right-click and switch it to note values instead of hertz, and now you can see you actually have the piano note values. And I mentioned that specifically because you'll see from A1 all the way up, okay? And again, mostly I'll work in hertz. All right, so here, maybe just, let's just get into the processing and affecting bit. This is kind of more fun. Now you kind of get the idea of like how to repair, remove, identify. Again, you can do your editing too. No reason that you couldn't actually do voice editing this way. It's very easy to see those attacks, right? To see where those transients occur. Just one more sort of visual, just in terms of noise. Now, again, I'll cover this in the noise reduction lesson later this week. But like here, we have recording from a tape. Take just a quick listen to this. So that is real old school. That is cassette tape hiss. Hey, Serban. I'm actually using OBS, but the zooming that you're seeing, this is via the Mac OS accessibility. That's how I'm doing those. Using Command, Option, plus or minus, and you just have to enable the zoom function in accessibility. Visually identifying noises, you can actually see that this is a very complex hiss that goes all the way up to the Nyquist limit here, all right? Which is why, again, you've heard me say in other streams, when denoising things from tape, it used to be that we wanted to take all that stuff out, get rid of all of this. The problem is, good stuff lives up there. So if you suck it all out, you're gonna end up with something that's very flat. So visually, we can say, all right, I don't want to remove noise from this area anyway, because there's a lot of ambience. Or you can control how much you remove. Similarly, we can also see that there's some like low-end rumble. And if you're listening in headphones or with a good sub right now, probably feels like you're kind of underwater. All right. Also, you can see like if there's different types of hiss present in a song. And actually, this was like in between recordings. So this was just probably it had some kind of auto leveling on the tape player. So when I actually went into recording, you can still hear a lot of, but the visual characteristic has changed. So again, you can more carefully make good decisions about removing and attenuating noise. All right, that's a lot of stuff on noise and fixing and repairing, plosives, things like that. All right, what about using Spectral to actually edit and produce sound, create sound, extract sound? So this one here, now normally I noise reduce this and painting on sound as well. This is a file, classic, I've used it for years, of a very squeaky door from a warehouse. Okay, it's a stereo file, you can hear it very nicely. And years ago I used to say, okay, so this is recorded and somebody recorded this sound effect of the squeaky warehouse door. And you can hear that it has this kind of whistle as it opens. Those last two creaks, that didn't bother the director, this stuff here. But this here, and if you probably were looking at it, you probably could already see where it was. That's where it lives, friends. Now, I could take my marquee and just delete it, and that'll leave a little bit of a hole. Okay, it's probably better than what it was. Or now I can go into some of my Photoshop tools once again, and I'll use my lasso, and I can very carefully draw a selection around this noise. Isolate it. What the what? All right. Grungy, is there anywhere you can listen to all of my Beatles remakes? Haha, not yet. Not yet. And there are, I mean, literally more than 100 of them. You know, that was how I started to learn recording when I built my first studio when I was 12 years old by remaking Beatles songs. So I think to date, I've got 120 or something. I mean, I remade almost all of them, a lot of them. So no, not yet. Hopefully I'll put out at least one album by the end of this year that has maybe a top 10. You know, some I did fairly recently in the last decade or so. Some are really old and nope, you'll never see those commercially available until after I die. So, what do we want to do with this? Well, we made our selection now. And if we wanted to, again, we could attenuate right here. Simply make it quieter, which is going to leave a hole. But now, whoops, sorry. I keep doing that. Sorry about that. Now when I play this back, the squeak is totally gone. But I can also use that healing brush that you see up at the top here. Just like in Photoshop. Oh, and I should have increased my brush size there. That's okay. You can see right up here there's a brush size selection. And I'm actually going to paint on this noise. And when I let go of the healing brush, it does just that. Just like with imagery, it heals it. And sometimes, just like with content-aware fill and other things, you got to do a few passes of it. The difference with healing is that you notice it didn't leave a hole, right? Because it's analyzing all the pixels before and after and underneath and trying to do a very intelligent, clean attenuation without leaving that sonic hole there. So now when I play this back, it's very faint. And if I wanted to do even more, and you can notice there's no hole at all on the other channel. And now if I wanted to, I could take something like that paintbrush and just attenuate those little frequencies right there just by a few dB, maybe like 10 dB or so. All right. And it's all but gone. And again, visually you can see, oh my God, this is so clean, right? Can you delete it on one channel only? Absolutely you can, Mad Mips. Great question. Now to do that, this may seem a little backwards. Let me go ahead and I'm gonna bring some of that back in. We'll leave that there. To do it on a single channel, you have to go back into the waveform view and disable the channel that you don't want to affect. In this case, the right channel. Go back into the spectral display and now make your selection, or here I'll make my paintbrush bigger or my healing brush bigger. Paint only on this channel. Whoops, I went a little too far there. And delete. And now I've only deleted it on that channel, okay? By the way, if you noticed when I extended here, notice how these were very faint, right? The opacity set at 50 here. That works like a wet-dry balance. The lower the opacity, the more it lets the original signal come through. The higher the opacity, the more destructively it's going to apply a process. Which brings me to my next quick example. Now we're gonna go till about 5 minutes after because we started about 5 minutes in, okay? So that answers your question, Mips. Sweet. Sweet, sweet, sweet. The clone stamp would be perfect, Achilles. Well, I'm going to show you that right now, actually. Because, what if I didn't want to take this sound out? What if I wanted to process this sound? What if I wanted multiple of these? What if I wanted to reverberate just those frequencies? It is kind of a creepy sound effect. Well, I could come in here, and actually what I'm going to do is do what you just suggested first. I'm going to make a selection like this. Command C, copy. Command V, paste. Whoops, I did it again, sorry. I can paste just those frequencies that I selected. Even better. Let's go. Let's copy this to a new file. All right, I'm going to make my selection. Oh, I'm getting very wacky with my mouse right now. Make my selection, right-click, copy to new. Remember, we learned this from the editing lesson last week. Boom. Now, that's what it looks like. This is very isolated. That's why you're only seeing this minimized frequency here. But here's that sound effect. Isolated by itself. So you can pull things out, put them in their own file, and affect them separately. Oh, wow. Yes. Thank you so much, Neil. Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it. Minecraft likes this. All right. So now we can affect this, and then we could put it back in there if we wanted to. Process and place it back in. How do we know exactly where we'd place it back in? Best way to do that to ensure that you're in exactly the right place, just drop in a marker, M. All right. So if you process this in its own file, did something to it, and then pasted it back right here, right over top, and again, use some of those techniques that I showed you, either inserting, which we don't want to do, overlapping, which we might want to do, overwriting, or modulating one with the other, right, to create some kind of cool, again, stereo and or sound design-based effect, you can do that here. Craziness, right? Now here's where this gets really cool for remixing, mashups, and thinking very creatively. Oh, and by the way, just one more thing to show you visually. So this is like a Moog that's creating just straight sine waves, right? This is what a Moog analog synthesizer looks like with basic sine waves. Right? And again, if we were to turn this back to notes, you can actually see all of the pitches that I've played, all right? And my device was pretty in tune here because you can actually see that they are exact note values, all right? But once again, check this out. This is one of my favorite things to do because I actually, I use this a lot. Okay, so this is actually, and this will be our last thing before now we're gonna take a break. I'm sorry, no, that's incorrect. I'm going to stop the stream and restart in 2 minutes. So stick around and we're gonna work on actually remixing and mashing up. And I'm looking for remixers. If you remix, if you do remixes, if you got some examples of your remix work, I want to hear it in the next 2 hours. We'll let the mods let you post links or give me a Dropbox link and I'll download it. And I want to hear what you've done because I want some help with some remixing. But this is this recording that we did a few weeks ago where I did a live recording of that song, How Can We Hang On To A Dream, and sang it with pizzicato and choir. What can I do? She's saying we're through with how it was. Oh, thank you, Ian. All right. So this is one of my favorite things to showcase here. Now, I really love this performance. I admit, I really do. It was a really nice impromptu vocal. But what I really wanted to do was add a little bit of a delay to my voice, an echo, which I couldn't really do because this was mixed live. This is actually pulled off of the stream. So here's how I can do that. Now, this is pretty awesome. And I'm going to make a spectral selection. Now, I don't want to add delay to those pizzicato bass notes. So again, visually, I can identify where those are. All right. And I'm going to make a selection approximately just a little bit of the bass, but none of those bass fundamentals. You do not want to add delay to a bass frequency. It's just going to get too boomy. It's not going to sound good. But I do want to add delay to this whole vocal section right here, specifically an analog delay, which is what I've gone ahead and added here. And I want I want a very long echo. I want to hear, what can I say, say, she's walking away, which in this case happens to be around 695 milliseconds. So take a quick listen to what this is doing. And again, because I've now identified where this is going, it's only going to affect those frequencies right there. Okay, now you think that's cool, but can I hear it in the context of the whole track? Yes. So I'm going to apply that delay just to that selected range. Now, yes, there's a little bit of the pizzicato in there. There's a little bit of the choir in there. But the fundamental frequencies that it's processing are the voices, the vocals, my vocal. So now if I take the selection out and we play this back. What can I do? She's saying we're through with how it was. What will I try? I still don't see why. Just give me the chills. Why? She says what she does. She says what she does. How can we hang on to Is it real? Is it live? Or is it Memorex? Nice. Sukalicious. Okay? Cool? We dig that? So, my friends, that in a nutshell. Oh, I did it again, Ian. Oh, in a nutshell. This is me in this nutshell, right? Austin Powers did it the best. That is spectral editing, how and when and why to use the spectral frequency display. So I'm going to take a quick pause, literally seconds, to stop the stream and restart, and we're going to talk about remixing. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, this will be available on the VOD immediately, as soon as I stop the stream here. I'm going to come back in just a few seconds. We're going to work on remixing some audio. I'm going to remix an old soundtrack of mine, and I want to hear your remixing capabilities if you've got them, because I'm looking to produce a new single, or actually 2 or 3, and perhaps one of you could be part of it. So thank you again for joining me. Thank you, everyone. Alpha, it makes you happy as a clam. Very nice. LARP Dog, awesome. Thank you. Magenta, Electron Hammer. Ian, Lusai, I know. Dude, you killed me with that comment on YouTube, by the way, about guys and gals. And Dominic, oh, thank you. Memorex. All right, geeking out over it. Sweet, grungy. You don't even know what kids don't know what a Memorex tape is anyway. That's so true. That's okay. Can you post Electron Hammer? Yes. PJ Gaudier. Hey. How are you doing? So nice to see you here. Okay, Pierre Julien. All right, I'm going to stop the stream. You may have to refresh your browser. You may have to refresh your app. I will be right back, and my mods will change the titles. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed Lesson 3, Spectral Editing. See you in just a moment.